Sophie Bennett pressed the snooze button for the third time that morning. Her small apartment in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle still wrapped in early morning darkness. At 27, she had worked tirelessly to establish herself as a promising marketing specialist at Brightwave Marketing, a mid-sized agency known for its creative campaigns. Her studio apartment might have been modest, with its second-hand furniture and plants that somehow survived despite her irregular watering schedule, but every achievement, certificate, and campaign poster on her walls told a story of determination and hard work. The shrill ring of her phone cut through her sleepy haze. Her manager, Robert Chen, never called this early unless something serious had happened. Sophie grabbed the phone, her heart already racing with anticipation. Robert's voice came through, urgent and apologetic at once. He explained that his wife had gone into early labor, and he needed Sophie to handle the most important presentation of their agency's history. Sterling Technologies, one of Seattle's fastest-growing tech companies, had requested a final marketing proposal for their new product launch. The meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m., just 3 hours away. Racing against time, Sophie's hands trembled slightly as she hung up the phone. Sterling Technologies was a dream client, the kind of account that could transform her career from promising to extraordinary. She had worked alongside Robert on this campaign for months, studying every detail of their revolutionary cloud computing platform. She knew the material inside and out, but presenting it to Nathan Sterling himself was another matter entirely. Nathan Sterling had become something of a legend in Seattle's tech community. At 35, he had built Sterling Technologies from a small startup in his garage into a company valued at over $2 billion. Business magazines featured him regularly, praising not just his business acumen but his commitment to ethical technology and employee welfare. Sophie had seen his photographs in Forbes and TechCrunch, those intense hazel eyes and confident smile that seemed to see right through corporate pretense. She chose her outfit with extra care that morning. A tailored charcoal blazer over a cream silk blouse, paired with a fitted pencil skirt in deep burgundy. The skirt was relatively new, purchased specifically for important client meetings. It made her feel professional and confident, hitting just at her knees with a modest slit at the back for easier movement. She completed the ensemble with simple black heels and the delicate gold necklace her grandmother had given her for college graduation, entering the Lion's Den. Sterling Technologies occupied a stunning glass building in downtown Seattle, its modern architecture reflecting the innovation happening within its walls. The lobby featured living walls of moss and ferns, creating an atmosphere that felt both cutting-edge and surprisingly peaceful. Sophie checked in at the reception desk, where a friendly woman with bright red hair directed her to the executive floor. The elevator ascended swiftly, offering glimpses of the city and Puget Sound through its glass walls. Sophie reviewed her notes one final time, reminding herself to breathe deeply and speak clearly. She had practiced this presentation dozens of times, could recite the key points in her sleep. Yet knowing that Nathan Sterling would be evaluating every word added pressure she had never felt before. A tall man with silver-streaked hair and an easy smile met her as the elevator doors opened. He introduced himself as Peter Walsh, Nathan's chief operating officer. He led Sophie through an open office space where employees worked at standing desks, surrounded by plants and natural light. The atmosphere felt more like a creative studio than a corporate office. The moment that changed everything. The conference room commanded a breathtaking view of Elliott Bay and the Olympic Mountains beyond. Floor-to-ceiling windows filled the space with natural light, and the conference table was a beautiful piece of reclaimed wood that must have come from an old ship. But Sophie barely noticed any of this, because Nathan Sterling stood by the windows. Ending a phone call as she entered, he was taller than she had imagined. With an athletic build that suggested he actually used the company gym, his dark hair was slightly tousled, as though he had been running his hands through it during a difficult call. When he turned to face her, those hazel eyes from the magazine photos proved even more striking in person. Flecked with gold and green that seemed to shift in the natural light, Nathan crossed the room with easy confidence. Extending his hand with a warm smile that transformed his entire face, his handshake was firm without being aggressive. And Sophie noticed the calluses on his palm, suggesting he did more than sit behind a desk all day. He thanked her for stepping in on such short notice and expressed concern for Robert's family situation. As they settled around the conference table, Sophie arranged her materials with practiced efficiency. She had prepared a combination of digital slides and physical mock-ups, believing that tangible elements made presentations more memorable. Peter Walsh took a seat beside Nathan, while two other executives joined them. A woman named Jennifer, who headed their product development team, and a younger man named Lucas from their sales division. When everything went wrong and right, Sophie began her presentation with confidence, explaining how their campaign would position Sterling Technologies' new cloud platform as not just technologically superior, but ethically responsible. She discussed their research into customer concerns about data privacy and environmental impact, showing how Sterling's commitment to both could become their strongest marketing advantage. The presentation was going perfectly. Nathan leaned forward with obvious interest, asking thoughtful questions that showed he had read their preliminary materials carefully. Jennifer nodded along with several key points, and even Peter, who had a reputation for being difficult to impress, seemed engaged. Then Sophie reached for the physical mock-up of their proposed billboard design, which she had placed on a side table near the windows. As she stood and turned to retrieve it, her skirt caught on the arm of the modern chair in a way she could never have anticipated. The fabric pulled tight, and she felt it ride up significantly, exposing far more of her legs than any professional setting warranted. Time seemed to slow down. Sophie felt heat flood her cheeks as she quickly tugged the skirt back into place, her hands shaking slightly with embarrassment. But before she could stammer an apology, she caught Nathan's expression. His eyes had indeed noticed, but there was no judgment or unprofessional leering in his gaze. Instead, she saw something unexpected. A spark of genuine attraction mixed with concern for her, embarrassment, and something that looked almost like admiration for how quickly she recovered her composure. Their eyes met for a moment that stretched longer than it should have. Sophie saw Nathan's lips curve into the slightest smile, not mocking, but reassuring, as though he was trying to tell her without words that she should not worry. He cleared his throat gently and gestured toward the mock-up she had been reaching for, finding. Her rhythm against something shifted in that moment. The formal atmosphere relaxed slightly, becoming more like a conversation between colleagues than a high-stakes presentation. Sophie found her voice again, her confidence returning as she explained the mock-up design. She detailed how the billboard's clean lines and powerful messaging would capture attention without resorting to the cluttered approach their competitors used. Nathan asked about the campaign's digital strategy, and Sophie enthusiastically described their plans for social media engagement and influencer partnerships. She had researched which tech bloggers and YouTubers aligned with Sterling Technologies' values, proposing authentic collaborations rather than paid advertisements that audiences could smell from miles away. As the presentation continued, Sophie noticed Nathan watching her with an intensity that went beyond professional interest. When she explained their proposed timeline, his attention never wavered. When she discussed budget allocations, he nodded thoughtfully, but his eyes kept returning to her face as though memorizing her. Features. The presentation concluded with Sophie's strongest argument. Sterling Technologies could lead the industry, not just in innovation, but in corporate responsibility. Their marketing campaign would attract customers who wanted their technology choices to reflect their values. In a world increasingly concerned about privacy and environmental impact, Sterling could become the brand that people trusted not just with their data, but with their future. An unexpected invitation. The room fell silent for a moment after Sophie finished. Then Nathan began to clap, and the others joined in. Jennifer declared the campaign brilliant, exactly what their brand needed. Peter nodded his approval, admitting that he had been skeptical about hiring an outside agency, but now saw the value of fresh perspective. Nathan stood and approached Sophie, his hand extended once more. But this time, his grip lingered just a moment longer than professional courtesy required. He told her that her presentation had exceeded all expectations, that she had understood their company's mission better than some people who had worked there for years. Then he surprised everyone in the room, including himself, judging by Peter's raised eyebrows. Nathan asked if Sophie would be willing to meet with him again to discuss the campaign's implementation in more detail. But the way he phrased it, suggesting dinner rather than another office meeting, made it clear this was not entirely about business. Sophie felt her heart skip a beat. She knew she should maintain professional boundaries, should suggest another formal meeting at the office. But something in Nathan's expression, a vulnerability beneath the confidence, made her want to know more about the man behind the CEO title. She heard herself accepting the invitation, her voice surprisingly steady. Nathan's smile brightened, and he promised to have his assistant coordinate the details. As Sophie gathered her materials to leave, she felt his eyes following her, and she knew without doubt that her life had just taken an unexpected turn toward something extraordinary. Sophie floated through the rest of that day in a daze of disbelief and excitement. Back at the Brightwave marketing office, her colleague and best friend Jasmine Park practically pounced on her the moment she walked through the door. Jasmine had been with the agency for 5 years and had become Sophie's closest confidant. The kind of friend who could read her expressions like an open book. Jasmine took one look at Sophie's flushed cheeks and sparkling eyes and dragged her into the small break room, closing the door for privacy. She demanded every detail, and Sophie found herself recounting the entire morning. From the wardrobe malfunction to Nathan's unexpected dinner invitation, Jasmine listened with growing excitement, occasionally interrupting with gasps and encouraging comments. The presentation had been successful, beyond anyone's expectations. Nathan's assistant had already emailed confirming that Sterling Technologies wanted to move forward with their agency. But more personally thrilling was the second email that arrived an hour later, this one from Nathan himself. He suggested meeting at a small coffee shop in the Fremont neighborhood that evening, somewhere quiet where they could talk without the formality of his corporate environment. Sophie changed clothes 3 times in her apartment before settling, on dark jeans and a soft sweater in forest green that Jasmine had insisted brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. She wanted to look approachable rather than like she was trying too hard. Her long chestnut hair fell in natural waves past her shoulders, and she kept her makeup minimal, just enough to highlight her features without appearing overly done. Where stories begin. The coffee shop Nathan had chosen was called the Wandering Bean, a cozy spot tucked into a quiet street corner. Vintage bookshelves lined the walls, filled with dog-eared novels that customers were encouraged to read and trade. Mismatched furniture created intimate conversation nooks, the aroma of freshly ground coffee beans mixed with the sweet scent of homemade pastries. String lights draped across the ceiling created a warm ambience that felt worlds away from corporate conference rooms. Nathan was already there when Sophie arrived. Sitting at a corner table near a window that overlooked a small community garden, he had changed from his business attire into jeans and a navy Henley that made him look younger and more relaxed. When he saw her enter, his face lit up with a genuine smile that made her stomach flutter. He stood as she approached, a gentlemanly gesture that seemed natural rather than performative. He had already ordered her a cappuccino, explaining with slight embarrassment that he had asked his assistant what Sophie had requested during her office visit that morning. The thoughtfulness of this small detail touched her more than any grand gesture could have. Breaking down the walls, they talked for hours, the conversation flowing with surprising ease. Nathan proved to be nothing like the intimidating CEO from business magazines. He spoke passionately about technology's potential to solve real problems, about his dream of making Sterling Technologies a company where employees genuinely wanted to work. But he also revealed vulnerabilities. Admitting that success had often felt isolating, Nathan shared stories from his childhood in a small town in Oregon, where his father had worked at a lumber mill and his mother had taught elementary school. He had been the first in his family to attend college, working multiple jobs to afford tuition at the University of Washington. The experience had taught him that privilege was not something to take for granted, but something to extend to others when possible. Sophie found herself opening up in ways she rarely did with people she had just met. She told him about growing up in Tacoma, about her father leaving when she was young and her mother working 2 jobs to keep their small family afloat. She described how creating marketing campaigns gave her the same feeling she had experienced as a child writing stories. The thrill of crafting narratives that moved people and changed perspectives, Nathan listened with complete attention, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested rather than just being polite. When she mentioned that her mother now worked as a receptionist at a dental office, he asked about her health and whether she was proud of Sophie's accomplishments. The question made Sophie's eyes well up slightly because, yes, her mother was incredibly proud, but also because Nathan had thought to ask. The vulnerability of successes. The evening deepened, and the coffee shop began to empty. Their conversation turned more personal. Nathan admitted that, despite his success, he often felt disconnected from genuine human connection. Most people either wanted something from him or were intimidated by his position. Dating had become particularly complicated, with women interested in his wealth rather than who he was beneath the title. Sophie understood more than he might have expected. She confessed that her own rising career had created distance in some friendships, that people sometimes treated her differently when they learned about her professional success. But she had always believed that real connection required seeing beyond surfaces, beyond titles and bank accounts to the actual person underneath. Nathan reached across the table and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. He told her that meeting her had felt different from the moment she had walked into that conference room. Even before the accidental moment with her skirt, he had been struck by the passion in her voice when she talked about his company's mission. She had seen Sterling Technologies not as a client to impress, but as an opportunity to do meaningful work. Sophie felt her heart racing as she looked into his eyes. She admitted that she had been nervous about this evening, worried that the chemistry she felt might be one-sided or that mixing professional relationships with personal feelings was a mistake. But sitting here with him, talking as though they had known each other for years rather than hours, felt more right than anything had in a long time. A proposal beyond business. Nathan suggested they continue their evening over dinner, and Sophie agreed without hesitation. They walked through the Fremont neighborhood as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Nathan pointed out his favorite bookstore, a quirky shop that specialized in science fiction and hosted author readings every Thursday. Sophie showed him the small art gallery where she occasionally helped a friend with exhibition marketing. The restaurant Nathan chose was intimate and unpretentious, a family-owned Italian place where the owner greeted him by name and teased him about finally bringing someone special to meet them. The old man, who introduced himself as Giuseppe, winked at Sophie and promised to prepare something extraordinary for them. Over plates of handmade pasta and glasses of wine that tasted like bottled sunshine, their conversation deepened further. Nathan spoke about the pressure of running a company where thousands of employees depended on his decisions. He described the loneliness of being unable to show uncertainty or fear, of always needing to project confidence even when he felt lost. Sophie shared her own fears about whether she was talented enough to deserve her success, about the imposter syndrome that sometimes kept her awake at night. She worried that one day people would realize she was just making educated guesses, rather than possessing some innate genius for marketing. Nathan smiled at this admission and told her that every successful person he knew felt the same way. That doubt was not weakness, but awareness of how much there was still to learn. When hearts speak truths. As Giuseppe cleared their plates and brought them complimentary tiramisu, Nathan grew quiet for a moment. Then he looked at Sophie with an expression so open and vulnerable that it took her breath away. He told her that he had not expected to meet someone like her, someone who made him want to be honest rather than impressive. He admitted that he was tired of relationships that felt like negotiations, of women who dated the idea of him rather than the reality. Sophie set down her fork, her hands trembling slightly. She told him that she felt the same pull, the same sense that something significant was beginning. But she also needed him to understand that she valued her independence and career. If they explored whatever this was between them, it could not be about him rescuing her or advancing her career through his influence. She needed to succeed on her own merits. Nathan's response made her fall for him a little bit more. He said that he would never want to diminish her accomplishments by making them about him. What attracted him was precisely her drive and talent, her refusal to compromise her values for convenience. He suggested they take things slowly, getting to know each other without pressure or expectations. But he also wanted her to know that he saw something rare in her, something worth pursuing despite the complications. A beginning written in starlight, they left the restaurant as the city lights began to twinkle like earthbound stars. Nathan offered to drive Sophie home, but she suggested they walk instead, not wanting the evening to end. They wandered through the quiet streets, their hands finding each other naturally. The contact felt electric, yet comfortable. Like coming home to a place she had never been, Nathan told her about his plans to expand Sterling Technology's charitable foundation, about his dream of providing technology education to underprivileged communities. Sophie shared her secret ambition to eventually start her own agency focused on marketing for nonprofit organizations and social enterprises. Their dreams aligned in ways that felt almost too perfect, as though the universe had conspired to bring them together. When they finally reached Sophie's apartment building, Nathan walked her to the door like a gentleman from another era. He cupped her face gently with both hands, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her knees weak. He asked permission before kissing her, and when she nodded, his lips met hers in a kiss that was tender yet passionate, promising everything without demanding anything, as Sophie floated up the stairs to her apartment. She knew her life had fundamentally changed. Nathan Sterling was not just a successful CEO or a dream client. He was a man who saw her completely, who valued her mind and heart as much as her appearance. And she was falling for him with a speed that should have terrified. Her butt instead felt like the most natural thing in the world. Sophie woke to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window and a text, a message that made her heart sing. Nathan had sent her a photo of the sunrise from his penthouse with a simple message about how he had not been able to stop thinking about their evening together. She replied with a smile, telling him that she had barely slept, her mind replaying every moment of their conversation and that perfect goodnight kiss. The next few weeks unfolded like a beautiful dream that Sophie kept expecting to end but never did. Nathan proved to be thoughtful and attentive without being overwhelming. He sent her articles about marketing trends he thought she would find interesting. He remembered small details from their conversations, like her favorite author and her coffee order. But he also respected her need for space and independence, never pressuring her to spend more time together than felt comfortable. Their relationship developed through a series of perfect moments. Coffee dates before work where they discussed everything from philosophy to their favorite childhood cartoons. Long walks around Green Lake where they fed the ducks and talked about their dreams. Quiet evenings at his penthouse where they cooked dinner together. Nathan proving surprisingly skilled in the kitchen, despite his wealth and busy schedule. Meeting the challenge 3 weeks into their relationship, Sophie faced her first real test. A competing agency had approached Sterling Technologies with an aggressive pitch, claiming they could achieve better results for less money. Nathan called an emergency meeting to evaluate both proposals, and Sophie found herself defending her campaign against professionals with twice her experience and industry connections. She could only dream about the presentation took place in the same conference room where she had first met Nathan. But this time, the atmosphere was tense rather than welcoming. The competing agency, led by a sharp woman named Victoria Cross, presented slick materials and impressive case studies. They highlighted Brightwave, marketing's relative inexperience with tech companies, and questioned whether Sophie's team could deliver on such an ambitious timeline. Sophie felt her confidence waver as Victoria systematically dismantled elements of their proposal. But then she caught Nathan's eye across the table. He gave her the slightest nod, gesture of encouragement that reminded her why she had gotten into this business in the first place. She loved creating meaningful campaigns, not just flashy presentations. Finding her voice, Sophie took a deep breath and stood, approaching the whiteboard with renewed determination. She acknowledged Victoria's valid points about timeline, concerns, but then laid out a detailed implementation plan that addressed every concern. She explained how Brightwave's smaller size actually provided advantages in flexibility and personalized attention that larger agencies could not match. But more importantly, Sophie spoke from the heart about what Sterling Technologies meant beyond just another client. She talked about Nathan's vision for ethical technology and how their campaign would attract customers who shared those values. She described the research she had personally conducted, interviewing Sterling's employees and customers to understand what made the company special. Victoria tried to interrupt with statistics about market penetration and conversion rates, but Sophie gently redirected the conversation. She pointed out that numbers could be manipulated to tell any story, but authentic connection with customers created loyalty that no amount of advertising could buy. Sterling Technologies did not need the biggest campaign, but the right campaign, one that reflected who they truly were. The room fell silent when she finished. Jennifer from product development was nodding enthusiastically. Peter Walsh had a slight smile on his usually stern face, and Nathan was looking at her with such pride and admiration that Sophie felt her cheeks warm despite her professional triumph. The decision that changed everything called Sophie that evening after the competing agency had left. He told her that her presentation had been extraordinary and that she had defended her work with passion and intelligence that impressed everyone in the room. But more than that, she had articulated his company's mission better than he sometimes could himself. Sterling Technologies was officially moving forward with Bright Wave marketing, and he wanted Sophie to lead the entire campaign personally. Sophie's joy was tempered by a sudden fear. She asked Nathan whether his decision was based purely on professional merit or whether their relationship had influenced him. The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications for both their personal and professional futures. Nathan's answer was thoughtful and honest. He admitted that loving her made him want to give her the world, but he also respected her too much to compromise her professional integrity. He had consulted with Peter and Jennifer privately, asking them to evaluate both proposals without considering his personal feelings. Both had independently concluded that Sophie's campaign was superior not because it was flashier, but because it was authentic. Love and truth intertwined, they met that night at Nathan's penthouse, a stunning space on the top floor of a building overlooking Elliott Bay. But Sophie barely noticed the luxury surrounding her because Nathan had prepared a simple dinner and set up a blanket fort on his balcony, complete with string lights and cushions. The childlike gesture from this powerful CEO touched her deeply. Under the stars, with the city lights glittering below them, they talked about their fears and hopes. Nathan admitted that he was falling in love with her, that she had awakened something in him that he thought might be dead after years of superficial relationships. But he also feared that his wealth and position might eventually come between them, that she might grow to resent the attention and pressure that came with being connected to him. Sophie took his hands in hers, her eyes bright with unshed tears. She told him that she was falling in love with him too, but not with the CEO or the billionaire. She loved the man who remembered her coffee order, who listened when she talked about her mother, who built blanket forts and admitted when he felt uncertain. She loved his integrity and his kindness, the way he treated his employees with respect and strangers with consideration. Partnership beyond romance, but Sophie also needed Nathan to understand something crucial. She would never be content being just his girlfriend or wife, someone defined by her relationship rather than her accomplishments. She had worked too hard to build her career, had sacrificed too much to let it be diminished. If they were going to build a life together, it had to be as equals and partners, each supporting the other's dreams without diminishing their own. Nathan pulled her close, his embrace strong and reassuring. He said that he wanted nothing less than exactly what she described. He told her about his own mother, who had given up her teaching career to support his father's ambitions and had regretted it for the rest of her life. He had promised himself that any woman he loved would have her own identity and accomplishments, her own reasons for being remembered beyond just being his partner. They kissed under the stars, and this time it felt like a promise rather than just a moment of passion. They were two people who had found each other against all odds, whose ambitions aligned rather than competed, whose love enhanced rather than complicated their individual journeys. 6 months of building dreams, the months that followed, were a whirlwind of professional success and deepening love. Sophie's campaign for Sterling Technologies launched to widespread acclaim, earning praise from industry publications and generating the exact kind of authentic engagement they had hoped for. Brightwave Marketing received calls from other tech companies wanting similar campaigns, and Robert promoted Sophie to senior marketing director. Nathan's company continued to thrive. But more importantly, he seemed happier than anyone could remember seeing him. His employees noticed that he smiled more, that he seemed less stressed despite the company's rapid growth. Peter Walsh privately told Sophie that she had given his friend something he had been missing, a sense of joy that went beyond business success. They kept their relationship relatively private, not because they were ashamed, but because they wanted to protect something precious from the scrutiny and speculation that would inevitably come. Sophie met Nathan's family, including his mother, who embraced her immediately and thanked her for making her son laugh again. Nathan attended Sophie's mother's birthday party, winning her over by genuinely listening to her stories about working in healthcare and treating her with the respect she deserved. The question under cherry blossom spring arrived in Seattle with an explosion of cherry blossoms that turned the city into something magical. Nathan surprised Sophie with a picnic in the Washington Park Arboretum, beneath trees heavy with pink and white blooms. They lay on a blanket surrounded by falling petals, talking about everything and nothing the way comfortable couples do. Then, Nathan sat up and took both of Sophie's hands in his expression serious, but his eyes dancing with happiness. He told her that the past 6 months had been the best of his life, that she had shown him what it meant to truly partner with someone rather than just date them. He loved her intelligence, her integrity, her refusal to compromise her values even when it would have been easier. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, and Sophie's breath caught in her throat. But when he opened it, instead of a ring, it contained a key. Nathan explained that he had purchased the building where the Wandering Bean coffee shop was located, the place where they had their first real conversation. He was giving it to her as a gift, with no strings attached. A space where she could open her own marketing agency focused on nonprofit, social enterprise clients. Sophie stared at the key, tears streaming down her face. She started to protest that it was too much, that she could not accept something so valuable. But Nathan gently pressed the key into her palm and told her that he was not trying to buy her or control her future. He was investing in her dream the same way he would invest in any promising venture. The building was hers to do with as she wished, and she could pay him back if her pride required it. Though he hoped she would see it as one partner supporting another's ambitions, a future written together. But then Nathan pulled out a second box, and this time Sophie knew what it contained before he even opened it. The ring was perfect. Simple platinum band with a single diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the fallen cherry blossoms. Nathan asked her to marry him, to build a life where they supported each other's dreams and created new ones together. Sophie said yes through her tears, and Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. They kissed, surrounded by cherry blossoms, two people who had found each other through an embarrassing accident during a business meeting and discovered something neither had dared to hope for, a love that celebrated their ambitions rather than competing with them. As they walked back through the park hand in hand, Sophie thought about that moment in the conference room when her skirt had caught on the chair. She had been mortified, certain she had ruined the most important presentation of her career. But that small accident had cracked open the professional facade between them, allowing Nathan to see her as a person rather than just a presenter. And in that moment of vulnerability, something beautiful had begun. Their story was just beginning, but Sophie knew it would be extraordinary. Because the best love stories were not about perfection, but about two imperfect people choosing to see each other clearly and love what they found. Nathan Sterling had looked past the CEO persona to find the man who built blanket forts and remembered coffee orders. And Sophie Bennett had become more than the talented marketer who impressed him in a meeting. She had become his partner, his equal, his greatest adventure. As the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they stood together, looking out at the city where they had found each other. Two dreamers who had learned that the greatest success was not measured in money or professional achievements, but in finding someone who celebrated your victories and supported your struggles, who saw your potential and helped you reach it without diminishing their own. And it had all started with a simple mistake during a meeting. when a CEO could not take his eyes off a woman who would change his life forever.